Welcome to the Olive Grove podcast. We dig deep into your source material to bring you the hidden gems and intriguing details. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Isaiah 44, and we're going to be using study notes from My Christian Space. And we're going to uncover the core message about idolatry and redemption and just highlight the parts that hopefully spark your curiosity.
Yeah. And we'll even take a look at some of the nuances that might surprise you, like the use of the complete Jewish Bible translation, which is what we're going to be using for this deep dive.
Okay, so let's just jump right into this. Isaiah 44 opens with God addressing Israel. He says, "Now listen, Yaakov, my servant, Israel, whom I have chosen." Right off the bat, even in the complete Jewish Bible translation, we're seeing these Hebrew names, Yaakov and Israel, which really emphasizes the specific lineage and the covenant relationship.
Exactly. It's so significant, this choice to use those original terms. It just gives you a deeper understanding of the cultural and historical context right from the beginning.
So the passage continues. "Thus says Adonai, who made you, formed you in the womb, and will help you. Don't be afraid, Yaakov, my servant, Yeshurun, whom I have chosen."
Yeah.
And I have to admit, Yeshurun, that's a new one for me. What's the significance of this name?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeshurun is a poetic name for Israel. It's often used to express endearment and kind of like a special status as God's chosen people. So it adds this layer of tenderness to the message.
Okay, so even though God is about to deliver some strong words about idolatry, he starts by reminding Israel of his love and his faithfulness.
Exactly. Yeah. He's setting the foundation of their relationship before he addresses their straying from him.
Okay, so then we get this. "For I will pour water on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. I will pour my spirit on your descendants, my blessing on your offspring. They will spring up among the grass like willows on the riverbanks."
Yeah. The passage uses the natural world here to paint a really vivid picture of Israel's future flourishing, once they turn back to God. And it's almost like a promise of renewal and revitalization.
I'm struck by the comparison to willows thriving by a riverbank. It's just a powerful image of their potential for growth.
It is a great image. And it's a good reminder that just as a tree needs water to flourish, our spiritual lives need nourishment from God.
The My Christian Space study notes emphasize how this opening section sets the stage for understanding God's unwavering plan for Israel, despite their rebellion.
Exactly. It really underscores God's faithfulness and his enduring love for his chosen people, which kind of sets the tone for the rest of the chapter.
Now, in verses 6 to 8, God makes some bold declarations. He says, "Thus says Adonai, Israel's king and redeemer, Adonai Tzva, I am the first and I am the last. Besides me, there is no God."
Wow. That name, Adonai Tzva'at, means the Lord of hosts, and it really signifies God's supreme authority over all powers, earthly, heavenly. He's over all of them.
So he's really establishing his ultimate power and authority right from the start.
Right from the start. Yeah, he's setting the stage for his critique of idolatry by reminding Israel and us that there is no other power that can compare.
"Who is like me? Let him speak out. Let him show me clearly what has been happening since I set up the eternal people. Let him foretell future signs and events. Don't be frightened. Don't be afraid. Didn't I tell you this long ago? I foretold it, and you're my witnesses. Is there any God besides me? There is no other rock, I know of none."
He's challenging anyone to even compare themselves to him, to prove their power, their knowledge, their ability to predict the future.
Yeah, it's like put up or shut up.
Basically, yes. He is highlighting the absurdity of placing faith in anything or anyone other than the one true God.
The MCS notes point out that God is not only asserting his unique power, but he's reaffirming his covenant with Israel, reminding them that they are his chosen people, his witnesses, to the world.
Yeah. He's reminding them of their identity and their role in his plan, despite their tendency to, stray toward idolatry.
Okay, now this is where things start to get interesting. In verses 9-11, the tone shifts dramatically, and God begins to address this problem of idolatry head-on.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back, does he? Listen to this. "All idol makers amount to nothing. Their precious productions profit no one, and their witnesses to their own shame neither see nor understand."
Wow. You can really feel the frustration and even sadness in his voice here. Like he's watching his beloved children chase after empty promises.
Yeah, and he lays out the inherent contradiction of idolatry, too. He asks, who would fashion a god or cast an image that profits no one anything? The very act of creating a god that needs to be fashioned, it exposes the fallacy of the whole endeavor.
All right, if you have to create it, how can it possibly be a true God?
Exactly. And God even goes on to emphasize the shame that awaits those who are participating in idolatry. All involved will be ashamed, but more than anyone else, the people who made them. Let them all be assembled, let them stand up, let them fear and be shamed together.
It's interesting that he directs his strongest words to the creators of the idols, rather than simply those who worship them.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I mean, it really suggests that there's a greater level of accountability for those who are perpetuating falsehoods. Those who are kind of leading others astray.
Then in verses 12-17, Isaiah gives us this really vivid, almost satirical description of the process of idol making. It says, "A blacksmith makes a tool over burning coals. With his strong arm, he shapes it with hammers. But when he gets hungry, his strength fails. If he doesn't drink water, he grows tired."
He uses these everyday examples to expose how absurd idolatry is. Like he highlights the irony that humans are using God's creation, the wood, the tools, the fire, to make these powerless idols.
Yeah, and he emphasizes the physical limitations of the idol maker, too. He gets hungry, he gets thirsty. He needs sustenance from the very God that he's trying to replace.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, look, even the one creating this, so-called, God is dependent on the true God for his very existence.
Okay, so then he continues. "A carpenter takes his measurements, sketches the shape with a stylus, planes the wood, checks it with calipers, and carves it into the shape of a man. And since it is honored like a man, of course it has to live in a house."
I love that. There's a real sense of satire there, almost mocking as he describes the meticulous care that goes into making this thing, this inanimate object. And then he highlights the absurdity of treating this piece of wood like it's a living being.
It's almost comical the way he describes it,
Yeah.
but yet there's still this underlying tragedy to it all.
Right, because ultimately this misplaced devotion just leads to emptiness and disappointment.
So then we get to the part where he's using part of this wood to build a fire and to cook his food.
Yeah.
He goes to chop down cedars. He takes an evergreen and an oak. He especially tends one tree in the forest, plants a pine for the rain to nourish. In time, when it's ready for use as fuel, he takes some of it to keep himself warm and burns some more to bake bread.
Again, he's emphasizing the irony. This man is using this wood to sustain his own life, yet he turns around and worships the same material as a god.
He's missing the point entirely. Like the sustenance, the warmth, the life-giving properties, all of it comes from the true God, not this thing he created.
Exactly. And yet, despite this clear evidence, the man persists in his delusion. He makes a god and worships it, carves it into an idol, and falls down before it.
So then Isaiah describes his self-deception. He writes, "So half of it he burns in the fire. With that half he roasts meat and eats his fill. He warms himself." Says, "It feels so good getting warm while watching the flames." With the rest of the log, he fashions a god, a carved image, then falls down before it. He worships it and prays to it. "Save me," he says, "for you are my God."
Yeah, this is where we can see the psychological aspect of idolatry. Like, it's not just about ignorance, it's a willful blindness, a refusal to even acknowledge the truth.
So the My Christian Space Notes refer to this as a deceived heart that prevents people from seeing the reality of God and the emptiness of these idols.
Yeah, it's such a powerful concept. And it's something that, I think we can all relate to, even if we don't worship physical idols.
Right. What are the things in our own lives that we might be clinging to that don't offer us any real satisfaction or security? Material possessions, status, approval.
All good examples. Anything that takes precedence over our relationship with God can become an idol. It can lead us down a path of emptiness and disappointment.
Yeah. I was thinking about this idea of a deceived heart and how it manifests in our lives today. And I remember a time when I was so focused on achieving success in my career that it just consumed all my thoughts and all my actions. And I was working really long hours, neglecting my family and my friends, and feeling constantly stressed and anxious.
It sounds like your career had become an idol for you in a way. You were putting all of your hope and your identity in it.
It definitely had. Yeah, and it wasn't until I realized how much it was affecting me, like my well-being, my relationships, that I was able to kind of step back and reevaluate my priorities.
That's a powerful example of how idolatry can sneak into our lives, in subtle ways. We might not be bowing down to statues, but we can still be enslaved to things that can't satisfy our deepest longings.
And that's where the message of redemption is so crucial. Because Isaiah doesn't just leave us with this bleak picture of idolatry, right? He points us to a path of hope and restoration.
Right after all of this condemnation of idolatry, we see God's incredible love and mercy shining through. Like, he doesn't abandon his people in their mess. He calls them back to himself.
He really does. And in verses 18-20, Isaiah describes how deep this self-deception goes with idolatry. Such people know nothing, understand nothing. Their eyes are sealed shut so they can't see. Their hearts, too, so they can't understand.
This blindness, it's a direct consequence of choosing to worship created things rather than the Creator.
And it leads to such a profound emptiness. He goes on, not one thinks to himself, or has the knowledge or the discernment, to say, I burned half of it in the fire, baked bread on its coals, roasted meat and ate it. Should I now make the rest an abomination? Should I prostrate myself to a tree trunk? He is relying on ashes. A deceived heart has led him astray, so that now he won't save himself, just won't say, this thing in my hand is a fraud.
Yeah, relying on ashes, it just captures the futility of it all, of placing hope in something so fleeting.
But then in verses 21, 22, we see this beautiful shift, where God, in his mercy, offers a path back. Keep these matters in mind, Yaakov, for you, Israel, are my servant. I formed you, you are my own servant. Israel, don't forget me. Like a thick cloud, I wipe away your offenses. Like a cloud, your sins. Come back to me, for I have redeemed you.
It's incredible. Like, even after denouncing all of this idolatry, exposing the emptiness of it, God extends his hand of forgiveness. He invites Israel to return. This is the heart of the gospel. No matter how far we've strayed, God's love and mercy are always available.
I just love that image of God wiping away our offenses like a thick cloud. It's just this beautiful picture of forgiveness.
It really is, yeah. And it speaks to the completeness of his grace, too. Our sins are not minimized. They're totally erased.
And it's not just Israel who benefits. In verse 23, creation itself rejoices. Sing, you heavens, for Adonai has done it. Shout, you depths of the earth. Mountains break out into song, along with every tree in the forest. For Adonai has redeemed Yaakov. He glorifies himself in Israel.
This verse is so amazing. It foreshadows the ultimate restoration that God has planned. When humanity is reconciled to God, creation itself is liberated from the consequences of sin.
Wow. That's really profound.
Yeah.
Our spiritual well-being connected to the health of the natural world.
Yeah, like our actions have this ripple effect impacting not just ourselves, but the world around us.
Okay, so this brings us to the final section of Isaiah 44, where God asserts his authority and control over everything, even his choice of Cyrus to rebuild Jerusalem.
This is where we see God's sovereignty in action. He says, I am Adonai, who makes all things, who stretched out the heavens all alone, who spread out the earth all by myself. I frustrate false prophets and their omens. I make fools of diviners. I drive back the sages and make their wisdom look silly. I confirm my servants' prophecies and make my messengers' plans succeed.
It's a reminder that God is in control, even when things seem chaotic.
And then he says, I say of Jerusalem, she will be lived in, of the cities of Yehuda, they will be rebuilt. I will restore their ruins. I say to the deep sea, dry up. I will make your streams run dry. I say of Koresh, he is my shepherd. He will do everything I want. He will say of Jerusalem, you will be rebuilt, and of the temple, your foundation will be laid.
So Cyrus, this Persian king, a pagan ruler, is chosen by God to restore Israel.
It's pretty remarkable, God uses anyone to accomplish his purposes.
Really challenges our assumptions about how God works and how his plans unfold.
Yeah, it really does. It's a good reminder that God's ways are higher than ours.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Isaiah 44, I'm just in awe of the multifaceted nature of God. We've seen his righteous anger, his tender love, his faithfulness, and his sovereign power.
And it all points us to the one true God, the one worthy of our worship and devotion.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Isaiah 44, you want to learn more, you can check out the My Christian Space website. They've got tons of great resources.
Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe to the Olive Grove podcast on YouTube for more deep dives like this one.
We release new episodes every week, and you can actually get early access on the My Christian Space website. So until next time, thanks for joining us, and may you experience the fullness of God's love and power in your life.